Hey everybody, James Floyd Kelly here. Welcome to another episode of Novel Ideas. I'm here with Erik Wex. Is this episode 5?
I believe we're at episode 5.
Wow. I can't wait till the day when we go, is this episode 100?
Right.
Holy cow. Yeah.
Right.
You got to start somewhere, right?
It's good. That's
It's
good.
good. We're on episode 5, and again, the Erik and I have kind of agreed that we want to keep these short, 15 minutes, give or take. We want to make them something that you can listen to quickly, get some information that will benefit you. But again, we always invite our viewers to send in questions at Erik's website or his blog. Post your questions, and we would love to hear them and possibly tackle them in a future episode. But for this episode, we are going to talk about professionalism. It's a big word, but in the self-publishing world, professionalism is everything, and Erik's going to tell us a little bit about that. And Erik, why don't we start with what your definition of professionalism is in terms of self-publishing?
So professionalism to me is making sure that you convey to your potential audience that your book is of the quality that they would expect if they bought a traditionally published book. And in some ways, I feel like you almost have to communicate that it's better than a traditionally published book, because you already have I'm not going to call it a stigma. It's just that if I'm picking through Amazon and I know that I'm much less likely to get clunkers with the big 5, there isn't a reason for me to pick an independently published book unless I know for sure that it's going to be good. And so professionalism is all those things you do to tell the reader that your book is going to be good before they read it.
Now, if I understand correctly, because you and I have talked about this in the past, one of the sure signs that you are on the professional track is that your book, if it were in a print version, you should have you could go to the bookstore, pull a copy off the shelf, of another traditional book, and let's just talk about the cover for a second. With the cover, you should not be able to tell that, oh, this was self-published and this was traditionally published, right?
That is the idea, right? And I'll be honest, you can't quite get there with CreateSpace, right, which is my paperback self-publishing platform. It is, at least once you know them, it's really easy to spot a CreateSpace book. And what's really irritating to me is to go find all these small independent publishers where you're like, that's a CreateSpace book. It took what percentage from the author for doing that? I just don't agree with that. I think that's a little bit of ripping people off when they could have done that themselves. Now, that's fine. They probably got the cover artist, and they probably provided value in time to the author, but it's not my way of doing things. But you can get as close as you can, and I think that you can actually do better covers as an indie author, and I think you should shoot for a better cover. And one of the reasons for that is I have control over the cover and the cover artist in a way that I don't when I sell to the big 5. And there are books that get wrecked because the cover doesn't actually reflect well the content of the book.
Well, let me interrupt you there. How does someone go about finding a cover artist that would do a good cover for your book?
You would be surprised. You know, my last cover for The Far Bank of the Rubicon, which I think is my favorite cover that I've done, as good as the Jason Gurley covers were, and Jason Gurley's a friend of mine, and they're fantastic. Jason has a little bit of Steinbeck in all his writing and all his covers, and they're fantastic covers, and they're great for my books, but I don't have that little bit of Steinbeck in my writing, and so the cover that I found, I felt like just reflected my space opera universe slightly better, and that was a search on DeviantArt and looking at all the great science fiction art that's out there, and coming up with my favorite person, who happened to be Andre Wallin, who did the concept art, some concept art for Godzilla. He did concept art for Oblivion. He does concept art for Elder Scrolls Online. And he's a really great artist. I thought, there's no way this is going to be thousands and thousands of dollars, and I'm not willing to pay that. And I asked and got a non-exclusive license, so other people can use that same photo in their covers, and other places. But I got a great license for a reasonable price.
Now, I'm assuming that if another independent artist or independent writer that wanted to self-publish their book, that your artist would probably say, hey, by the way, this has been used in another book, right?
I would assume so. And again, I don't. That's okay. It's such a great painting that even if other people put it out there, it's still going to support my work fine. So I'm not someone who stresses about that too much. And if you want to drop down a couple of tiers to artists who aren't that well known, you could probably pick up exclusive licenses for around the same price that I paid for a non-exclusive license.
And just so we're clear with our viewers, you're going to always be negotiating with the artist. You can't say it's a flat 100 or a flat 500. Right. It's you need to enter into a relationship with that artist so that you can negotiate a fair price.
Yeah, and I think for an independent artist, or independent author, you should expect to pay $500 for your cover.
500. Okay. You know what?
Expect that.
If that's the difference between your book looking like it was photocopied at Kinko's and put on the shelf versus something that you would be proud to sell to a science fiction fan, that's not a bad thing.
And the thing I want to say about that's really, really important is the way to think of it is you are a lottery ticket on Amazon, right? You have 5 million other or more than 5 million, I think it's 8 million now or something, number of books that you're competing against to get someone to buy yours versus all of those other 8 million. And so
every bit counts.
Your cover, if it's not good enough, they're not giving you a second look because they got plenty of other chances, right?
And let's be honest, if you were going to publish, the standard traditional publishing route, traditional publishers, those covers, they're paying thousands or tens of thousands of dollars. Yes. So in a sense, it's a steal. It's a really good bargain to work with an independent artist.
Right, and while we're on the topic of money, let me transition us to editing, because the other place where you're going to pay is for an editor, right? Unless you've got some person in your life who is a true grammar Nazi, right? Who's just fantastic with commas and all that stuff. And not just your average, like they can write a letter and it's okay, but I mean they catch everything.
Right.
And they tell you about it constantly, right? Unless you have that person, you are going to pay another $500 to $1,000 to at least for a copy editor. And for first novels, or for someone, if you're getting feedback from your beta readers that's for any reason like I'm not sure what's going on here, but I don't like it, and it's all over the map, let's say, right? You put it out to a bunch of people and they're like something's wrong, but it's not consistent. Then you're going to pay another $1,000 to a developmental editor. So editing is $1,000 for a developmental edit and $500 for a copy edit. Again,
these are people who hang a shingle and basically advertise their services, that there are places you can find them, right?
Yes, there are places to find them. I haven't done a lot of hunting, so I couldn't tell you the ways to know. What I would want to see is a list of references. I'm going to go the very traditional route of how do you hire a contractor there. Sure. I'd want to see a list of references. I want to talk to those references. I would go buy some of those books that they edited and see if I'm comfortable with the way they edited. I would shoot big again. Some of the great authors or the great editors for Tor, I've heard recently that I know of at least one who was part of the Star Wars universe. I don't remember the person's name, but they were part of the Star Wars universe and they did some editing for Tor and they left and they're now doing independent editing. Nice. Those people are worth their weight in gold. Sure. And write other authors. Write a Hugh Howey. Write someone whose work you've read that's an indie author and they've got a great edit, and find out who their editor was and hire that person.
Well, when you and I were talking about professionalism, you mentioned a lot of other things. It's not just the cover and not just the editing. You mentioned in the previous discussion we had that it's really important about the blurb, the book description, and you mentioned something called, I think it was tagline or tags.
Yeah, absolutely.
What about those?
All right, so if you think of and all that you do, everything you do to professionalize your work is based on the buying process for the reader. Okay. So if you think about the buying process on Amazon, the first thing they see is your cover. If they get past that glance at your cover, they're going to look right at your title.
Right.
If they get past your title, they're going to look at your blurb.
Which is usually on the back of the book, right?
On the back of the book.
But
Or on Amazon, you scroll down a little ways,
Right.
it's right there on the page, right?
Okay.
So they're going to look at that next. Okay, so that is, and what they're doing is, I might be interested. They look at the first line of the blurb, and they buy or they don't buy the book. The rest of the blurb confirms it.
Got it.
Okay, so the buy is with the hook that comes in the first line of the blurb. And I always go back to the very best hook I've ever heard is from Annie Bollett's book Avarice, which is a fantastic fantasy book that kind of has a lot of Dungeons and Dragons and a lot of Pathfinder in the background of it. But it's a book called Avarice, and this is Law and Order with sword fights.
Law and Order with sword fighting.
And it is a Law and Order episode with sword fights that about 50,000 words, and it is fantastic. I love police procedural dramas. I love playing Pathfinder with my family. It's a fantastic idea to put those two worlds together.
Now
it's great.
Okay, now the first thing I'm going to say is that particular description, if I were to read it, two things are going to happen. Either they nailed me because that's a very specific description that you're taking a chance on, because anyone who's not a Law and Order fan is going to go, oh, that's not for me. And if you're not a sword and sorcery or a sword fighting type person, you're going to go, oh, that's not for me. But you are right. If you are either or a fan of one of those genres, that's a grabber. Yeah.
It's a great one, and I don't think it has to be that you're specifically Law and Order, but you can be as a police procedural fan. So I love things like Jasper Ford's police procedurals, all his very comedy-oriented police procedurals. I love a good Agatha Christie, though I haven't read one of those in a long time.
So that was really the first line. You're telling me that the first line of the description is Law and Order meets sword fighting.
Yeah, and that's what you're looking to do, right? In that it is something that someone who pitches movie scripts is very familiar with doing, right?
Sure.
And it's the same idea for a book, that when you're pitching it to an agent, and I would argue when you're pitching it to an audience, you have one sentence, maybe two, to describe it. And so that sentence is the most important thing that you will write, because you have spent 6 months, a year, 2 years on the book,
right?
And you win or lose buyers with that one sentence. So no pressure there at all.
But you know what? Let's remind viewers that you can always change it. I mean,
yes.
That is something that could be edited very quickly. If you find out that somebody gives you some feedback, you could change that, and it's instant. Amazon pretty much changes the description within, 24 hours, I'm guessing?
Yep, within 24 hours. So if you find, the Amazon would give its indie authors and is the number of page views they're getting. Right? Because then if you can calculate the number of page views versus the number of buys, you can actually get some information about whether your blurb is working.
Yeah, it's too bad they don't do A/B testing with descriptions. Yes. You could have two different pages for your same book and test out. You know what? Knowing Amazon, as smart as those people are,
it's coming.
It's probably in the works. Yeah,
it'll show up.
Yeah, it'll show up. And if viewers aren't understanding what we're talking about with A/B testing, if you do a Google ad, for example, Google will let you create multiple ads for the same product, and you can change the wording, and it'll actually give you the feedback as to which of those ads has a click-through, which people clicked that ad versus the other ad. And what it does is it basically helps you identify what wording works and what word doesn't. So yeah, the description, you could great. I hope Amazon comes out with something like that.
Another way to look at A/B testing is those very annoying, eye-grabbing pictures that are all along the bottom of your local news stations page and a lot of blogs now. That is all A/B testing, right? And it's usually a mostly scantily clad woman with some kind of tagline that's not even related. It'll be like the best pet food for your dog, and there'll be a bikini on there, and that's only happening because of the A/B testing, that they got more click-throughs on the bikini and more purchases based on the bikini than they did by the cute puppy picture. Yeah,
and you know that if your peanut butter is closer to the breasts, then
it's true.
The closer it is, it's going to sell more peanut butter. So there it is. That's it. Well, you know what? We've got about 2 minutes left here. talk about, you talked about the blurb, the tagline. We
Okay.
talked about the blurb, excuse me.
We
The
talked about the
tagline.
tagline, but we didn't. The tagline for your book is again something that goes on the cover that really gives you kind of a sense of what the book's about. And I haven't been real good at developing taglines for my books, so this is something that I'm just beginning to discover. But to step back for a half a second, the
Okay.
blurb which follows the hook is 2 paragraphs at the most. That's the one thing I want to emphasize. You are writing what goes on the back of the book, and it can't be an essay. It is not a description of everything that happens in the book. It is meant to cause the reader to want more. So should not be a full description. It is not a plot synopsis.
And you're
Okay?
saying 3 paragraphs. First
At the
paragraph is your hook.
most. First paragraph is the hook. You get 1 paragraph of content and really 1 paragraph to sum up with who you are and your credibility as an author.
Well, if you want to call yourself a writer, a professional writer, if you're going to write for a living, I guess you better start getting good at creating, descriptions that grab you, blurbs that grab you.
They're hell. I hate this process. I am notoriously bad at writing my own blurbs. I can look at your blurb and I can tell you what you need to change to make it better.
But not yourself.
I'm really bad at writing my own. I'm horrible at writing my own.
And I guess I'm thankful because in the nonfiction world, or at least the publishers I work with, they come up usually. A lot of times they come up with the title. I suggest a title, but they certainly will override it. They come up with the back. They'll ask me to write the back cover description, but a lot of times they'll edit it. So I'm very fortunate that I'm like you. I don't have a lot of practice or skill in that area, so I think I'm going to have to work on that.
Yeah, and I don't. I'm wordy, which is why I write 100,000-word novels. You give me a long distance run and I'm great, man. I am not dangerous over short distances like a dwarf. I'm a long distance guy. So you make me try to compact that stuff. Yeah. That's hard.
They call those elevator pitches. It's the idea that you're in the elevator with a future boss or somebody, and you've got 30 seconds before you get off the elevator to pitch your idea. If you can't do it in 30 seconds, they say you haven't got yourself defined. So it's kind of like that, I guess.
Yeah, and like we said earlier, the advantage for the indie is that you can change it, right? So if something's not working, change it, and don't stop changing it until you actually feel like it's selling at a reasonable pace based on the blurb. Right.
That's pretty cool. Well, viewers, if you have any questions about what we've discussed today, I really hope you'll submit some questions to Erik's website. We'd love to take this topic and continue further. But Erik, I let you pick last week. I let you pick professionalism this week. I hope you don't mind.
Pick next week.
I'd like to suggest for next time. I would really like to talk about the self-marketing. I've heard you mention briefly that you have a writers group that you work with, and you also work with maybe some other indie writers. I'd like to pick your brain next time about finding some people, some like-minded self-publishing authors, and forming this group. And maybe it's 2 members or 10 members. I don't know what the optimal size is, but maybe you can talk about next time some of the tools you use to find these folks, how you communicate, because most of the time they're not going to be in your own city or in your own neighborhood. So let's, if you don't mind, there we go. There's our timer. We're done. If you don't mind, next time maybe we could talk about I don't know what word we'll call that. Let's call it the writer group. Your
writers group. Yeah, and we can talk about critique groups, and that either fits in with next week or fits in with another time. Because I have strong opinions about critique groups. Critique groups, when they work right, are gold.
Critique groups. Okay.
95% of them don't work right. So this is the group where you're like, here's my first draft, and you get safe and honest feedback that's useful for creating a better second draft. I would say that writers often end up despairing and thinking there is no such thing because it's very difficult to get good feedback. And so there's some ways to help sort that out.
But it comes back to that fairness that you gotta, if you expect good feedback, you need to be able to give it, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, listen, man, it was good talking to you again this week.
Good talking with you.
And viewers, once again, please submit your questions. We've kept this to about, I think, under 17 minutes, give or take, maybe 18 minutes. We don't want to go any longer unless you want us to. But again, you have the opportunity to email a question to Erik, and hopefully we'll cover it in another episode. So this is Novel Ideas, episode 5. I'm going to sign off. Erik, have a great week.
You too. We'll talk to you soon.
We'll talk again next week, okay?
Yeah, sounds good.
Bye, everybody.